Hey folks, it's John Kraska with EveryLibrary and the EveryLibrary Institute. It is National Library Week 2025. Congratulations. It's Monday of National Library Week. We made it. We are doing the good things, I think, here at EveryLibrary and across the library community to try and bring a renewed focus on public library, school library, and academic library. This week, it's a national celebration that is largely opaque to non-library fans. All you library fans out there, thank you for being here tonight and helping us reach new people, especially with conversations about libraries, both in the good times. EveryLibrary is one of those good time organizations. We've got a lot of successes under our belt as the National Political Action Committee for Libraries. I want to make sure that if you're following along at home, you can visit us at everylibrary.org to learn more, to become part of it. We've got a lot of positive campaigns out there. We're helping to pass legislation in many states that guarantees the right to read or expands the budgets for libraries. We're also working on some block and tackle in some states that are trying to oppose just bad ideas for libraries, including criminalization bills and cuts to state library funding. But the biggest thing we're doing right now, National Library Week 2025, Monday, April 7th, is continuing to work on, well, President Trump decided to try and close the Federal Institute of Museum and Library Services on March 14th, and then brought in a fellow to be the acting director of the Institute of Museum and Library Services, who then laid off all the staff, and then they stopped sending out money to state libraries and museums and grant recipients. Folks, we're trying to turn things around in Congress, and mercifully, there's a court case happening now. It's a very fraught National Library Week right now, but I'd like to invite you, please, to come to Save IMLS, the Institute of Museum and Library Services.org, and take some action. We've got everything from petitions to Congress to ask them to do the right thing in terms of congressional oversight, letters to the editor, tools there, ways to share it and syndicate it, because for every dollar you bring into a public library, there's about $5 to $7 in local benefits. But all these state libraries and all these museums that use this federal funding in small amounts of smart money in very, very important ways, they need your support. All right, the reason that we're doing as much as we're doing right now during National Library Week around nonfiction is because I'm the executive director and I get to say, I love Nonfiction Week. My wife has been enjoying our fiction weeks. We've been doing fiction. We had a nice Library Lovers Week thing, literary fiction. We had a Banned Books Week thing a couple months ago. Again, great stuff, wonderful people, had a great time. But I get to talk to the folks this week that I want to talk to. And I'm going to bring in two of them right now, who I am fascinated by. Bryan Ford, Mike Szczerban, bakery. I'm not the house baker. But Penn and Dulce has a space in our family right now because my wife is, and we compete vigorously for who's got the funnest thing to do that night, okay? Now, I'm a man in my early middle ages, a white guy from the suburbs in my early middle ages. You either have to choose your World War II or Civil War, or you go smoke meat. That's what I've been doing, is the smoke meat route, okay? But... okay, well, before we get into this conversation, because we were having a lively chat in the green room, I need to read your official bios. Okay? So, Bryan Ford is a Honduran-American baker, cookbook author, and host of Baked in Tradition. He's the author of New World Sourdough and Pan y Dulce, a 2024 standout cookbook celebrating Latin American baking. He's also a judge on Netflix's Blue Ribbon Baking Championship and co-owner of Pan y Café, a bakery inspired by his latest book. Known for his warm, approachable style, Bryan is redefining artisanal baking through cultural storytelling. And Bryan Szczerban. Bryan is vice president and publisher of Little Brown's Voracious and Spark imprints. He's edited best-selling and award-winning cookbooks and cultural titles, including Salt, Fat, Acid, and Heat, Accidentally Wes Anderson, and Pan y Dulce. A longtime advocate for storytelling that makes life better, Mike helps authors turn passions into lasting cultural impact. Bryan, I'm very interested in finding out what kind of competitions you have in the house around.
Competitions, man. I don't know. I guess several. You just talking about around my house?
Well, so my wife and I, she goes for bacon. I go for smoking meats. Like who's got the better dish? Yeah.
My wife makes the healthier food that's gonna keep me alive,
mm-hmm.
and I make the food that is just If I
Yeah.
just
No, I get you.
really, you know what I'm saying, really good. So
Mhm.
I mean, her
Yeah.
cooking is incredible too, but it's, you know, it'll be like vegan, like eggplant stir fry with
Mhm.
like high fiber brown rice. You know what
Mhm.
I'm saying? And then, but
Mhm.
then when I cook, first of all, I got bread and pastries all over the place all the time.
Yes.
So that's that. And then when I cook dinner, I'll make like arroz con pollo. I'll make
Mhm.
some chuleta frita with plátano frito. I'll just like start throwing down. So I'm working on it because I think, you know, we have a kid coming in 4 weeks. Woo,
Oh,
4 weeks.
goodness gracious. Yes.
I know. So I'm gonna start working on the more longevity cooking soon.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, that's really fantastic. I mean, your book has got like there's a section in here about laminating with butter, you know, which is in that sort of croissant kind of style. You know, you've got a section in here that fights amongst its own opinions. No offense, between like you know how to do a baguette, and then you've got. I mean, I don't often run into coconut milk in the same book as you know the laminating butter. I mean, where did you train, Bryan?
Where I train? Oh
Mm-hmm.
man, I trained in New Orleans, man. I trained at the crib in New Orleans. I trained, you know, I mean, I started off as a cook, and then I just taught myself how to bake king cakes,
Love it.
uh, you know,
So,
and
like, did you have influences down there that you really loved and respected?
yeah, of course. I mean, I think just being from New Orleans is always being exposed. So I'm from New Orleans, and then my household is Honduran. So I was always, my mom was cooking really good food, you know, and then I was getting exposed to the culinary traditions of New Orleans. So I mean, I think the influences of the city itself and the beauty that it brings to the table in terms of being so unique. It's actually the best food city in the country. It's the only food city that has its own cuisine. It doesn't rely upon other cultures to bring their cuisine. Well, I mean, technically speaking, if you want to go all the way back in the day, it's obviously colonially influenced, but so is everything. So, you know, New Orleans is a very special place, and I taught myself to bake just by championing those traditions, and it just kind of spiraled into also digging into my Latin American heritage.
No, that's a hell of a thing. I mean, your first book. I mean, you timed the pandemic beautifully with the sourdough revolution. So I was telling you in the green room that I started putting you into Google, and it's Bryan Ford sourdough is what comes up first. I mean that like, but I don't think about sourdough in New Orleans. I don't. I mean, like,
No.
but I'm kind of a culinary tourist as opposed to a resident. I mean, is that where that came from for you?
I mean, yeah, I mean, like there's I think there's perceptions about where you can, like, if you say the word sourdough a lot, like most people will think of a few places. Um, New Orleans is a growing baking. It has a growing baking culture that's outside of like the po' boy breads and the king cakes of the, you know, the Randazzos and the Lenheimers and like kind of that, and the Cafe du Monde, the beignets. There's those iconic places you can go for baked goods, but there's also a new wave of bakeries and bakers. Lanyap Bakehouse, James Beard semifinalist,
Mm-hmm.
Black owned, incredible bakery that is making phenomenal bread and pastry. You know, Bellegarde Bakery, using regional stone mill grains, using sourdough. So at the end of the day, I mean, you know, it's like Oaxaca. Oaxaca is known for the mezcal, but they got massive influence in the baking world in Mexico. So it really is about just learning a little bit more about a place, and you'll see that, you know, sourdough, quote unquote, is just a leavening technique. So once you start to have a community of bakers in a certain city, you
Mm-hmm.
will start to understand that place. Like you look at Miami, you look at Zach the Baker. Before Zach the Baker, Miami didn't have sourdough. But now, if you said sourdough and you said, you know, Florida or Miami, I'm thinking Zach the Baker. That's the homie. He's putting it on. So it really is all about bakers hustling and putting the product out there to a community that doesn't have it. And New Orleans is one of those communities that's growing in the baking world.
That's really fascinating. The shift into Penny Dulce, though. I mean, there's a lot of sourdough starter in here. There's a lot of yeast conversations in here, and it's absolutely essential. And yet, how did you make the shift, or why did you make the shift?
The shift from sourdough to also using other forms of yeast.
Yeah, well, forgive me. The like your first book is a sourdough book. This one is Latin American Afro traditions. Like taking that next step into your own culture.
Well, it's all about finding people like Michael who believe in it. I mean, at the end of the day, New World Sourdough, my first book, was conceptualized in 2018, and I was new to the blogging world, and at the time, like I said, I was envisioning trying to make something like Pani Dulce from the get-go. Mm-hmm. But as I got into the world of working with a publishing company, and I didn't have an agent or anything, I was just floating around existing, and someone reached out to me and they're like, hey, you want to write a book? Pan de Coco's blowing up. And I was like, I'd love to write a book, and I'm going to tell you what it's all about. And they were like, oh, slow down there, partner. This is a little too intense for what we're thinking. We're thinking something more, like what came out. So at the end of the day, after New World Sourdough came out, and thankfully it did well, there were lots of editors that were interested in working with me to expand upon this idea that sourdough should not just be this one mindset, right? And so after a lot of conversations, I ended up working with Michael. I think that, Michael's like a brother to me now, man. It's my homie, man. It's my absolute family. And, the conversations with him resonated with me. His belief in Latin American baking and where we could take it resonated with me. And that shift came because Michael believed in me. And that shift came because he took the time to work with me to find the best mechanisms to deliver 150 Latin American baking recipes from the 33 different countries, including the Caribbean. It was definitely quite the task. So it's what I always wanted to do when I started writing about baking, and I'm very, very thankful I was able to pull it off.
Well, we were able to pull it off. The book's extraordinary, but that ability to toss it to Michael now, Bryan, that was even better. I mean, that was so smooth. That was beautiful. So
almost like this guy's on TV or something.
Yeah, no kidding. That was great. That's great. Let's talk. I mean, I want to talk to Michael about this, because Michael, you've been involved in some of the bigger cookbooks out there. Salt, fat, acid, heat. I mean, it's in everybody's kitchen, or it's in everybody's bookshelf, and it should be, because it is one of those. You can read the science of cooking, books and get really into it, and you should, I think, if you're serious about it. But that's one of those books that's like both it confirms what you know, but it also helps you evolve your knowledge, because anybody who says that they spent enough time thinking about vinegar is lying to you, unless they're really into pickling, So how do you as an editor, as somebody on the publishing side, I mean, what brings you to the project, and what makes you think it's going to stick with readers?
Good question. Honestly, if I had the crystal ball, I think I'd be a lot wealthier than I am now. So it does kind of come down to gut. But just to go back 1 second, thank you, Bryan, for being so kind about this. But one of the coolest things is about this job is finding somebody you can collaborate with. The coolest thing that I get to do is when I learn or feel that there's a book that the world needs. I don't have to be the one to write it. I can go find the dude who's got the knowledge and share everything that I've learned about bringing a book to the marketplace, and we can work together to make it happen. So for me, a motto for all of the cookbooks that I work on is just that food touches everything. What was so cool about Pani Dulce when it first came in was just how much it blew my mind, that I realized that there was another way of thinking about baking that I just hadn't thought of before. And there was a richness to that thinking that was both very delicious sounding, but that it also touched all of these other hugely important historical and cultural things. I mean, I remember some of the early conversations that Bryan and I had when he was reading a book about sugar plantations in Brazil. and you're thinking like, wow, okay, how do I separate the incredible development of pan dulce as a culture of sweet bread throughout all of these countries and cultures? How do I separate that from the trade in chattel slavery? Like, how do I separate that from the destruction of rainforests and trading diverse ecosystems for monocultures? It's like, wait a second, this is a much different conversation than I thought we might be having, but also one that was a lot richer. In terms of what's going to resonate with people, I think we're trying to present something that is real and that both gives them something real in terms of a recipe that they can take away that's going to be delicious and something that enhances their lives, but something that helps position that recipe in the world and helps you use that recipe to understand the world a little bit better.
Well, I need to compliment you both on this because I am the type of person who goes to the library and gets a cookbook to try it out before I buy it. Okay, I'm one of those trier before I buyer types. Once in a while, I'll buy a cookbook for somebody again, for given as a gift because I get out of the library first. I'm like, this has got me. And your book here is a keeper for a couple of reasons. Not the least of which is that it doesn't use 16-point type. You have seriously, and Michael, I'm not blowing smoke at you. There's a lot of density in here. This is not. Bryan, I want to celebrate your cooking, but not toss it off as a celebrity cookbook. There's information in here. There's reflection in here. There's history in here, and it's written. It's a textbook more so than it is a fluffy cookbook. And I really appreciate that because when I'm coming to it, it's the same with the salt, fat, acid, heat. Like I want to know some science behind it. I want to know some reasoning behind it. And you all have delivered really nicely here. I love this book.
I can say a lot went into it. Bryan did a great job.
Man, that was too kind. You putting me up there with some chill. That salt, fat, acid, heat is legendary. It's this was a book of personal struggle, of personal interest, of personal desire. It's a book that I didn't have that kind of co-writer, ghostwriter, or anything, man. It's just me writing stuff, me reading about stuff, and me figuring stuff out, learning about stuff I didn't know about my own history, our own history of my people, and trying to preserve that history within the confines of what's supposed to be a fun baking book, because it's like you're almost having to blend the fun, beautiful joy of baking with the trauma of factual history. And I think I don't even know how I did it, how we did it. I don't even know how it happened, man. But I guess it did, and it's out. Yeah. And when I look at it, it's cool. I bake from it. I'll pull it down, and I'll open the page up, and I'll read a head note, and I'm like, what word? That really happened? I'm just be like, man, I can't even remember what I wrote. And it'll bring me back to the moments spent. I read so many books in preparation for this, and still do. And I have this thought that if I were to start, obviously I have all this built-in information. I already did the book, but if I had to do the book again, like in this like alt universe, I would still need the same amount of time, and I would have it. Just there's so much there. It's mind blowing, and I'm just glad I had Michael there for me to do it with, because he really understood what I wanted to do, and we found the best way to do it. And it is certainly a time in the world where these things need to be done.
Well, all that literary fiction stuff that we do here at EveryLibrary, all these great weeks of conversations with authors who are writing heavy books and sad books and happy books, and even memoirists who are really empathy that's built by reading I mean, the empathy and the identification that's built by eating what you bake or cook out of a cookbook. I mean, the cultural stories that you're telling in here are some of yours, and there's some of them are bigger than yours. They're regional. The challenging that you're trying to do around culinary norms, I think, is pretty obvious in some sections of the book. But I had to sit up straight when I thought of when you made me think a lot about the Eurocentrism of baking. And that is something that I mean, I come from a family on my mother's side that's Austro-Hungarians, and I will eat a sacher-torte right now if you put it in front of me, you know. And sometimes I have to challenge myself with other cuisines because I'm like, oh, that's what I grew up with. And yet the empathy and the sympathy that come from sitting in a joyful meal setting or a sad meal setting, you know, like I think you brought something here for an audience that might not necessarily be regularly challenged by its cookbooks, especially around the Eurocentrism.
Well, I mean, it's it's a conversation that is like, let me ask you this, John, like what is Italian coffee, right? Like what is Lavazza or Illy or any of these brands? Like, do you drink, you know, Italian coffee? What is Italian?
Yeah.
You know,
well, I mean, I'm not much of a good palate on coffee, but I know the grind is different. I know there's a compactness that you need to do with it in order to. But what is it? I mean, I don't know. It's
beans come from Africa.
That's
they
right.
come from Honduras.
Yep.
They come from
Java.
All of these places that are not Europe, right?
Yeah.
And you know, same with chocolate. And like, sure, you could talk about these like finishing touches, but at the end of the day, you know, the point is there is always going to be in food specifically, because there's always going to be in life a centering focus on white cultures. So that's that. Whatever. We don't need to go there. But in food and in cuisine, you know, in terms of the top level techniques and in terms of the top level chefs, restaurants, and all that kind of thing, bakeries, it's always of the same mold. That is some form of European forward, you know, thing. And so that's really, at the end of the day, I'm not gonna say I don't understand why, because I know why. You know, I know why, but we ain't gonna go there right now. But you know, it was about time, and it is about time that we continue to pursue truth within cuisine and within flavors and within spices. I mean, the spice trade, everything, you know, everything is connected. And like, I don't know if people really understand where these ingredients came from and why. It's not even the where, like I just told you the Lavazza gets their coffee beans from, you know, maybe a blend of Honduras and Africa. Okay, cool, the where, but the why. I mean, if we went into the why of that, we would start talking about some crazy stuff.
I mean, I sometimes think about how boring it must have been. I mean, you're in World Germany in 1491. There's no tomatoes. There's no potatoes. There's no, you know, like, I mean, like all the things that make like the blend worthwhile. It comes from the in quotes new world. You know.
I mean, you know, listen, bro. You already know, man. You already know if you're gonna eat good food. If you're gonna eat good food, like really good food, you go into certain places, man. You know what I'm saying? So.
I know. Let me go back to Michael with a question, because like when we were talking in the green room earlier, I said that I've had some nice chats with authors and editors, you know, in sort of that literary process. I'm not being flip when I ask this. The role of an editor in a cookbook process, is it a sous chef? Do you test all the recipes? Are you helping to shape the narrative? Like, Michael, I have no idea what you do all day for a living there.
Oh, it's a big charade. Honestly,
awesome.
Now the curtain's gonna fall down.
It's a big riff, huh? Yeah.
I remember the first book that I inherited as a young editor was by Jonathan Waxman, who's a great chef. He'd grown up cooking at Chez Panisse and then Stars in California. It was a big part of the California food movement decades ago, and then runs a wonderful restaurant called Barbudo in New York City. And I inherited this book, had never done it before, and I sheepishly went to this editor who was leaving and handing the book to me. And I was like, I'm broke. Like, I don't think I can afford all the groceries. And she laughed and said, no, you're not the one testing all the recipes.
Okay.
So I do cook from every book that I publish, but I'm not doing every single recipe. You're kind of a guide. There's, I think what I am at my best is somebody who's kind of sitting on the author's shoulder and saying like, oh, that was an interesting move. Like, why did you do that? And depending, sometimes that leads to a change. Other times that leads to like a doubling down, but surfacing the meaning of all the cajillion decisions that get made in a book, from, big decisions like, what are we going to title it? How is it going to be structured, to little decisions about, is this a place to be funny or is this a place to be serious? I think one thing that, it's great to hear you talk about nonfiction in the context of an otherwise fiction-centric kind of set of programs, because I believe so strongly that that cookbooks, other practical books that do things for people and enhance their lives, or at least are intended to, are at their best when they deploy the same writerly toolkit that a novel does, or a great piece of journalism or reporting or history. It's voice, it's storytelling, it's impassioned argument, it's building that argument from research and logic. And I think that those are the things that, when you read one of those head notes that's sending Bryan into a fugue, the reason why I think you can't remember some of them is because we work so hard on them, because they want them to be self-contained jewels that shine on their own, but also reflect the light back onto the other pages around it. Something like a recipe head note is meant not only to inform somebody about what they need to do in order to approach the recipe successfully, but it needs to seduce the person to want to make it. I mean, to ask somebody to bake something like my favorite dish from this cookbook, Venezuelan pastry called the golfeado, which I will never stop talking about. Okay. It's a kind of an involved process. And if you've never made this before, on the one hand, you might go like, oh, okay, like I've seen a cinnamon roll or something like that. I could go with this. But on the other hand, it's labor intensive. So not only have I asked somebody to spend $40 to purchase this book or get it from the library, of course, but I've asked them to go out and purchase ingredients. In a book like this, some of those might involve going to a different store than they typically go to, spending money on that, then investing the time to do it, and then investing their reputation probably in serving it to somebody. That is a huge level of investment on behalf of the reader that we're asking for. We need to convince them to do that, and we need to be damn sure that the recipe is going to work at the end of the day. So I guess my job is just trying to be a stand-in for the reader, but also kind of a guide or butler throughout the process. It's like, okay, sir, in order to get to the place that you want to go, what else do you need? How can I help you get there?
Well, I think that's a wonderful kind of partnership, because all the images that I brought up in asking my question, Michael, were a different modality. And what you brought us to here, I think, is something that, you're bringing cookbooks into a much more literary place, and that requires a bit of a mentor around literary, perhaps, in the same way that a master chef and a junior chef, spend time together. I think that's a beautiful kind of opportunity.
Yeah, I do feel like it was interesting that we were talking about Simeon Nosrat and Bryan kind of in the same breath. And Bryan, I think everybody's being generous to everybody else, but I think that there is the potential knowledge of cooking is as vast and deep as like the oceans, right?
Mhm.
And unless you have the ability to navigate that water, you can drown in it.
Mhm.
I think that this is a reason why so many people don't have that skill, because they haven't found the right canoe to venture out onto that body of water.
Oh yeah.
What I think was so great that Bryan brought to this was he mapped a terrain that hadn't ever really been mapped for this particular audience before, among English language speaking readers. So I always said that Samin's book gave you kind of a compass rose to say, like, if you understand these 4 directions, you'll be able to get yourself anywhere in the kitchen.
Mhm.
Similarly, I wouldn't have known where to start to find my way to my beloved golfeada or the Argentinian fugazeta, or any of the other incredible baked goods that have so supremely enhanced my life, because it is so much more than what came out of France, Italy, Germany, and so on.
I love it. I love it. All right, team. It is National Library Week, we are turning a corner here. I need to put up my commercial for the Save IMLS again. I mean, this has been on my mind quite a bit. It's so nice to have this little bit of relief with you. But the work that has to be done right now in the United States of America around not letting our culture skid, I'm very worried about the fact that we are in a moment in time where the Institute of Museum and Library Services, IMLS, NEA, NEH, PBS, NPR, Smithsonian, Kennedy Center, they're all being recolonized in ways that I don't think are very good. And we're really trying to work hard on having a conversation with the American public that says, let's not go back to either 1953, 1870, or even pre that, SaveIMLS.org. I'd like to get your help, folks out there. And I hope that you will show up with us, not to bring us down. I want to talk about libraries in a very positive way. I often ask, what's your library story or your librarian story? Mike, do you have one in your back pocket?
Oh, yeah, I've got a couple. My librarian story is that my mom is one.
Get out of town. You didn't tell me that.
Yeah.
Help your official bio. You have to put that on the top,
My sister-in-law is librarian who works off of an IMLS grant, actually. So,
really? Please give her my best professionally.
I do often say the reason why I became a book publisher is that my dad sold billboard advertising. My mom was a middle school librarian, and I somehow am the product of all of that.
Yeah.
My favorite library story is that on my mom's stationery with the green circle with the silhouetted figure reading a book, I had a note that I was able to bring to the Concord Pike Library in Wilmington, Delaware, along with my LL Bean tote bag that said, please allow my son to check out as many books as he'd like, even above the limit. I promise he will read them and return them.
Get out of here.
Yeah. So that's me. Love libraries.
Michael, that's fantastic. I love it. Bryan, you gonna take us home with a good library story?
Yeah. I don't know how good it will be, but so
whatever it turns out to be, I'm all ears.
I went to Loyola University, New Orleans, and we have the J. Edgar and Louise S. Monroe Library, and it is one of the most incredible libraries you could ever step foot in. And so when people go to New Orleans, I always tell them, go to Loyola's campus and go to the library. Seriously, it's phenomenal. It's a huge, beautiful, welcoming place. And obviously I got my degree there. I was studying accounting, but it's where I learned how to kind of lock in and focus on details, how to become curious about books, how to really just dive into different things that I was just curious about, So like I said, I don't know if this is a compelling story, but it's a phenomenal library I had access to. They used to tell me it was like one of the best in the world, and I'd be like, really? But like, when I step back and think about it, it really just was a very, very grand place to study, to meet friends, to learn, to read, to research. And I hold that library deep within my soul.
I think that's beautiful. I've been in and out of New Orleans quite a bit over the years. We helped pass 2 fresh levies for the New Orleans Public Library.
Nice.
I raised your taxes twice. No, seriously.
That's
And
okay.
yeah, it's all right. It's not much.
I'll happily pay what I owe.
Yeah, but I never got over to the campus. Next time I'm down, I'm gonna go check that one out in particular.
Please do.
We got some good library friends in New Orleans, and it's real close to my heart. So, all right, you're both wonderful people for spending some time with me tonight and sharing about the book. Let me do the traditional hosting responsibilities, hold them back up, and thanking you both for sharing as deeply as you have tonight, both about the process, but also about the outcomes here. You know, it's outcomes that not only I think are delicious, but also that cultural conversation, that empathy conversation. I'm grateful to you both for taking a little time with me tonight.
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
For sure. We're going to do the traditional wave at the camera. I'm going to put up the card, and then we're going to go out, but I'm going to talk to you in the green room. All right, folks, have a good night.